The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand. We gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise to get what we want. We got to organize.
Good day, good evening, good afternoon, good folks, wherever you are. I am Jamilah, and I'm here with Evan. We are comrades who organize with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Of course, the objective of the All African People's Revolutionary Party is one unified socialist Africa. That is what we are organizing towards. And as far as what we're seeing in Howard, maybe the Howard students will start organizing towards that too. Maybe there are some A-APRP folks up in Howard, who knows? And there are some great folks who came from Howard, like Donnie Hathaway, Roberta Flack. I'd be interested in seeing what she has to say about this. But she is still here. So before that, we are going to honor ancestors, because without the ancestors doing the work that they did, they presented a baseline, a platform, some guidelines to the work that we are doing today. And we hope we are doing enough of a job and more to honor them. So today we are honoring Nat Turner and Jacques Garvey. So Evan, what's up?
We're honoring Nat Turner. Of course, we know quite a bit about Nat Turner, who led a anti-slavery rebellion in the South, in what we call New Africa, or which will one day be New Africa. So he led a rebellion, and unfortunately, like one of the largest rebellions known. And a couple of days ago, he was executed by the slave owners of the Snakes. And Jacques Garvey, who I'm sure people know about Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Jacques Garvey was the second one, but outside of it, she helped edit the Negro World newspaper, and particularly the Our Women and What They Think editorial section. So you should definitely read some of the stuff that Jacques Garvey, not only her but other female comrades in the UNIA wrote. And there's also lots of work with Marxist speeches and issues of common speaker of her own, organizer. And if you read the philosophy opinions of Marcus Garvey, as well as Garvey and Garveyism, those will explain a lot about her philosophy and impact on the Garvey movement. So I think those are two important ancestors. I think we should always honor them and keep on moving forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's so many connections in terms of what we're getting ready to talk about. So there's a lot of connections here with what our ancestors did in terms of gathering the masses, whether they're enslaved in the way that the majority of people think of enslavement. If you have a job and you're not being paid your worth, you are a wage slave. Let's not get that twisted. But we're not talking about that right now. That's a whole other episode. But if we're talking about the traditional sense of chattel slavery, we have Nat Turner gathering the masses to fight the oppressor, to fight the slave masters. And then we have Jacques Garvey in terms of speaking about theory, speaking about not only theorizing, but putting all that into praxis. So what's the phrase? Theory without practice is empty. So not only did Garvey say, okay, here are the tools theoretically in order to get our liberations African people, but here are the steps we can take with organizing. So those keys, I think, are really what we're seeing today. And it may or may not be that everyone who's protesting right now at Howard, they may be formulating an organization right now. We don't even know that is our hope that's happening. But it is a start of something. And there's just so many connections I'm seeing right now. And we were talking earlier, what's that dude, Travis Scott? I've never heard his music in my life.
Me neither.
I'm
I
sure
guess I heard of it on an ad or something. I don't know.
Really? So one thing or a few things that I did see is that he literally takes joy out of seeing people hurt. He celebrates people's injuries. I guess there was someone being carted who had passed and he's just like, yay! So I see a lot of the stuff happening with that guy at this festival that just happened to this country. And I see Travis Scott, just from everything I'm saying, as a narcissist. And this country in and of itself is the very representation of narcissism. So looking at this dude celebrating people getting injured and people being carted off as they're not even physically here anymore, I look at that as, for instance, the US military, where they're saying, you can go and fight for our freedom, but it's about stealing resources in other people's land. And then someone gets injured, someone has to get amputated, someone has PTSD, all of this stuff. And it's like, thank you for your service, but we're not going to help take care of you. There are going to be no medical provisions that are sufficient for what you're experiencing. Okay, bye, be on your own, you know? And so I feel like what's happening in terms of the Travis Scott thing, I see those connections where the masses who are working class people, poor people, but they took time and spent money to go to the show because they wanted to have a good time, but it became overcrowded. He encourages people apparently consistently to jump walls, which, you know, in another situation, people who are in political situations who are looking for asylum, yeah, go ahead. You know, that's one situation. But in this situation, it's already crowded and you are at a concert saying, okay, jump a wall, where people could potentially get hurt or worse. So people who are crossing borders, people who are migrants or whatever, are risking their lives to get to some semblance of being okay. And yet people like Cop Mala are like, you can't come here. But people like Travis Scott are being celebrated to behave like that. And it makes these companies money. But now Travis Scott is like, oh, you are not making us money right now. You are not economically viable for us. So we're going to drop you. And that's what's happening. So the same thing with people who are political outliers or who don't honor capitalism in some way. You are not viable to us. So we're going to put you on a domestic terrorist list or whatever. So to me, there's a lot of connections with this Travis Scott thing and what happens in the snakes and other countries that are settler colonialist that are rooted in capitalism. And we have to see that the primary enemy is capitalism, is whether it is through popular culture and celebrating death and lower vibrational energy, or the lower vibrational energy of the US military in supporting of stealing people's land and resources and not caring if innocent people get killed in order to have access to those resources. So I look at this whole thing on that level. And so we get to Howard, which is the main subject of this episode. And it doesn't matter if people are in their rooms choking from mold. I have a mold allergy. That is a serious thing. If it's not dealt with, you could be in the hospital. So there could be somebody with a mold allergy sitting up there, and you know, people in particular conditions, hold up with all these people in a room. You have to share a bathroom with like 20 people. It's not a situation that is conducive to people learning in positive ways or effective ways, because they're dealing with their basic everyday struggle of just trying to not breathe in mold in a room, for instance. And so the attitude is, okay, yeah, we'll deal with that, because now it's in several portions of media, but not necessarily capitalist media. But so yeah, people were dealing with health problems. So they said, okay, we're gonna camp out. And the administration's just like, okay, what are we gonna do? We'll just give some response to, the make sure on the surface people say it's okay. But then there was Felicia Rashad and Debbie Allen. So they had, what was it, a State of the University or whatever speech where the president made a speech. And so Felicia Rashad and Debbie Allen were outside of the Chadwick Boseman building, which was recently established. And then Felicia Rashad was appointed. And right before that, didn't she make those Bill Cosby comments? Oh, you're a justice or whatever, justice, whatever she said. And now this situation. So Debbie Allen, she was asked the question, and she says, well, it's great that students are, and I'm paraphrasing all this, it's great that students are rising up and they have to be heard. If there's a problem, students have to be heard. And then Felicia Rashad opens her mouth and says, well, what about the other side where, we're doing the best we can do and the students just don't think that's good enough?
University address, sorry, he's president. And I loved checking in with the students. What I said is that, we know what the Howard student body means. And in any country, when the students don't speak out, the nation is not doing well.
When the students do speak out, and they have been heard, and their concerns have been addressed, and it's still not enough, what about that?
And the question was asked by Debbie, well, are the students being heard? Like, is that what's going on? They're being listened to, they're being heard. Felicia Rashad says, I'm gonna shut that down and let's come inside, sis. Just don't answer their questions. It's like, wow. So yeah, I'm sure there's people out there, just like they do with R. Kelly, just like they do with all these other problematic Africans, based on the whole identity politics. Well, they're Africans and white supremacy and this system just attacks us as African people. So we have to hold on to some semblance of romance when it comes to these folks. And I guarantee you that is what's happening with Felicia Rashad. That's what happened with the Bill Cosby thing. And that's, I'm sure, what's happening now because she was Claire Huxtable. But her class interests do not match the students of Howard. It does not match most people who support her. And it certainly does not match the masses of people globally. So for her to shut down a simple question from her sister, are the students being listened to? That just shows you that her class interests are not in line with the students that are camping out who are saying, I'm going to develop health problems because I'm breathing in mold every day. And didn't Howard University also blame the students for the people in the kitchen, folks working in the kitchen for striking, or just so many people are striking right now, and it is amazing to see.
October.
I know. Yes. So we saw like Frito, like just all of these, like people at Amazon are still they were striking in Europe at Amazon, but of course here's a different story because there are a lot more protections in Europe in terms of striking. But here it's just Amazon made sure that there is something in place that workers do not strike, but that's not stopping the workers, and it's not stopping the workers at fast food joints from having mass walkouts. I mean, there's restaurants where there had to be signs that said, yeah, all the workers just, they quit today, so we're not open. I mean, this is a beautiful thing to see that workers are finally understanding I am not being paid my worth. Finally, workers are understanding. And I think, if we look dialectically, positives and negatives to things, I think COVID has shown dialectically the positive. Like, people are like, wait, I'm expendable and you're making me work all these extra hours because, someone else is sick, and at Amazon / whole paycheck, they literally were saying that the higher ups were literally saying, if you're not using your sick hours, just give them to somebody else. So what if that person who gave somebody their sick hours ended up getting sick, either just a common cold, pneumonia, or COVID, or worse? So now they don't have any sick hours. And then they're like, well, I'm sick today. I can't get, well, you're fired. So that is a system that Amazon has put in place, telling you to give up your sick hours for somebody. Workers just aren't valued anywhere. And workers are starting to realize that. And I think it is a wonderful thing. And students at Howard are also like, yeah, education is important, but so is my health. So are the living conditions. So are the basic needs that we're not getting here. Those are also important. And and somebody said, actually, this is why Africans still continue to go to PWIs, or predominantly white institutions. It's like, well, I wouldn't say that, that's a whole other thing. But what I do think is that people are starting to realize, again, if we get to class interest, this illusion that HBCUs are going to protect you simply because you're African, that illusion is going away. The veil is going down quicker and quicker by the second. So that is my 10-minute introductory TED Talk. I'm going to shut up and have you talk.
No problem. So one thing that was interesting to me, like before we were looking up and preparing for this, is that one thing is that, like, when there's a talk about capitalism and the risk class struggle versus workers and bosses and so forth, that there is, that you think, okay, if I work at a factory, if I work in an office, or working in a restaurant or like a store or something, like, obviously there's like the people, there's the workers, and you have like managers, and then there are the people who actually own the building, or own the factory, own whatever, or if it's like urban, like rural proletariat, like they own the farm, like large farm, or they own the data centers, and so forth. And the other thing is, then you might think, well, what about for nonprofits? What about for foundations? What about that? And one thing is that when I was looking at the board of trustees of Howard University, you just look at where they're working. So there's the ones like Fairview Capital, Citigroup, some like law firm, like large law firms, PepsiCo. There's more like some like nonprofit foundations. Let's see, like Federal Housing Finance Board. Like these are, like, you can tell, like, that these are people who probably don't care. They're not going to really care all that much about whether there's mold or anything. Like they have interest either of becoming capitalists, or at least being the sort of representatives of capital. So for one, they're not going to worry about that. And if they did have to worry, I'll just get someone to post paper, and then we're done, or just get another house. So again, there. But even if you don't think of even if you have like some idea of like surplus value or labor theory of value of like you doing X amount of labor and whatever extra they're getting is profit on their hands. But in the case of a nonprofit like a university or a library or museum, you think, where's the profit coming from? Or where is this? Well, all the board of trustees, in these cases, they get to decide the budget. They get to decide where is money coming from, what is going to be used on. So, and if you notice, as I mentioned for the Howard example, that a lot of these people, they're they're in they're in like large corporations. They might be in banks or in law firms or some other like accounting firms and so forth. So they have interest in making sure that whatever is going on is going to represent their interests. So then, like for example, if you talk about like a university, do you think they're going to have? Like there's the common like right wing trope that the universities, they're full of Marxists, they're full of commies and blah blah blah. But if you look at all this, like you think they're going to be interested in people reading about you think they're going to be interested in reading about people like of what classes talk about People's War? Do you think they're going to be talking about do you think they're going to be like studying Samir Amin or Emmanuel Holocene or Rosa Luxemburg or something like that? I doubt that. So, and even if you think of something like a library, that there is, like you think, oh, library, oh, it's like you think it's nothing. Like, think, oh, this library is good and so forth. But again, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm studying it for a master's degree in library science and history too. But one thing when you're reading about the history of libraries, especially modern libraries here in the United States and the UK, it's that a lot in a lot of cases they're reflecting the interests of the wealthy. Like if you think, like for example, here in New York, not be hoping that many of the public libraries are run by Andrew Carnegie, one of the wealthiest people ever lived. So and like in the case of like he was like one of the earliest like philanthropists, and in the case of like Carnegie or Mellon or Rockefeller or we talk about right now, or like Ford, Gates, so forth, that they form these philanthropic organizations to give himself a good name for other people. Like, well, I gave 20 million for this new opera house, or oh, I gave 10 million for this new museum, and they know how good, but that's like a small amount of all that wealth, all that surplus value, all that profit they get from doing everything else. And if you look at, in a lot of cases, a lot of the money, and like in a lot of cases, like when they set up these foundations, they're doing it for like the tax benefits. They're doing it to make sure they can use that money to invest it in some of the things that they're trying to solve against. So you have this issue, and so now to spin it back to Howard, like Jamil was saying, and talk about this identity politics, is that like not only do you have this like class issues involved, do you think they're really going to care all as much about students who are like dealing with these like health issues, but also like the vast majority of people on the board of trustees are African. So again, there's going to be that conflict between students, and again, it's like saying that in these cases of whether it's a HBCU or PWI, that these universities and colleges are there to like advance the interests of those that were safe. So when A-APRP talks about like if we talk with students, we're doing it so that because we know that I was as we talk about some of the alumni at Howard, one of the alumni at Howard was Kwame Ture, and as you say, that some of these people, they can use the skills they learn to advance the struggle for liberation. And you see that other struggles, that there are people who might be doctors, they might be librarians or lawyers and so forth. They've been leaders and part of these struggles. So in addition to like the advances of workers and peasants and lumpen. So and this again, you have and you say there's this opportunity for students to say, maybe if I become an engineer, I don't have to necessarily go to Raytheon, or if I become a lawyer, I don't have to work for like Sullivan Cromwell, or become a doctor, I don't have to work for Pfizer. They could actually use it to support the masses of people, to use those skills to support themselves. That's the one thing that they have to realize in organizing in spaces like that.
Exactly. My hope, again, is that that's going to develop out of these protests. There's going to be some students that will protest outside of that individual situation and understand that it is beyond that situation. It is the larger enemy of capitalism that is driving why you are protesting. I really do think, as a person who is an optimist, specifically due to doing this work organizing, I really do feel that there are students who are going to come out of this and understand that there is a larger structural issue that is occurring. And they're going to be like, HBCUs? Oh, okay, the illusion. I really hope. And talking earlier with Travis Scott, I do want to look at this situation and the connection between the HBCUs and the military. So there's actually an article from the Daily Signal, but it's like New York Times and all this, but it is a news story. So I do want to talk about this. So it is from 2020, and it does talk about the Heritage Foundation. They had an inaugural forum on HBCUs. And I know that, wasn't there a thing with Trump, making connection with HBCUs?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of this is connected to that. And so it was a panel that was hosted by James Carafano, who's a national security expert at the Heritage Foundation. And so it talked about the role that HBCUs played in ensuring military readiness and national security in the face of growing international challenges. So one of the things that we're seeing is a lot of Africans be like, well, China this and China that. And a lot of this is coming from the capitalist media. So if we have seen, when people were really organizing, like the Panthers, I think had a lot to do with dispelling a lot of that capitalist information. I mean, and Muhammad Ali, to keep it real. So there were folks who were like, okay, why are we going to go over there as African people? We're oppressed here. Why are we going to go and go kill other people who were oppressed by who you are our enemy? Like, why would we even do that? So there was a lot of that going on. But of course, the system did a whole lot of work in ramping up disinformation campaigns. I mean, like, this is the enemy, that's the enemy. And I think this is a huge component of that disinformation program. So it says Marshall Williams, the Army's principal deputy assistant secretary for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, said the quality of personnel is key for the U.S. military right now, because we can no longer count on our wealth advantage compared with our chief rivals. So the U.S. is acknowledging that in terms of infrastructure, in terms of even economics, because the U.S. owes trillions upon trillions of dollars, but continues to allocate billions upon trillions of dollars to military infrastructure. And so you keep having quantitative easing in order to pay for all this stuff, but yet, people are living in houses with mold. Okay, so it says Marshall Williams says, we live in trying times right now. The world has become far more complex. Russia and China, our near peer adversaries, have improved their large-scale ground combat capabilities, long-range capabilities, through significant advancements and investments in technology. This is the first time in our history that money isn't our advantage and that we can't outspend our opponents. We will win against our enemies by having the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time. That's how we're going to do it. So again, just like they do in Israel, just like they do in other places around the world where Africans are, we'll use you in the front lines to do our bidding. And then we're going to have disinformation campaigns to say, this is the enemy. So what say you, Evan?
One thing, I guess, as we mentioned before, there's we talk about the universities as we talk. One thing, the issue is of how to make sure that there's that concern that students, that the people who are these quote unquote manpower, whatever, to be on the front lines to build these build military, build this propaganda machine and so forth, that they're recognizing that you say wait, why I care about them? They realize that you're the issue. That's a big concern. And if you look at another thing I was looking at is and one of the big things that that's concerned with China is the whole Belt and Road Initiative, and the U.S. and other Western powers are trying to do this whole thing. It's called the Blue Dot. It's the Blue Dot Network. It's something similar, and if you follow the news lately, as far as some infrastructure deal and so forth, and that one of the things is the Build Back Better thing. And what do you think the Build Back Better is? You had to talk about, we're going to do it for childcare and it's this and green energy. So a lot of it is again to be competitive, and it's not. And again, any sort of misinformation, disinformation about being they're trying Biden's being the communist and blah blah. It's all this is just try to make it's bare it's not even social democracy. It's barely social liberalism, and again it's all of this to try to resolve any of the issues with any of the contradictions of capitalism. For example, we see the issues of inflation and supply chain and so forth. But again, but then of course, we're going to do more sanctions on Cuba. We're going to do sanctions on Nicaragua. We're going to do sanctions on Venezuela, Eritrea, blah blah blah, and doing all this to get resolve as many countries as possible and hold off its own collapse in some way.
Truth, yeah. I wanted to finish this. So Williams continues to say, there is no doubt that HBCUs are a valuable and powerful resource for our nation in terms of education of young African Americans and giving them the tools to help our country to compete globally. So then you have Lieutenant General Gwen Bingham, who's retired and was the Chief of Staff for Installation Management for the Army, and says, certainly when we talk about global readiness, military preparedness, the secret sauce, I believe, is our people. So again, people are the resources to be exploited. When we talk about global competitiveness and being able to have that military preparedness that gives us edge over our adversaries, it's really about our people. And certainly HBCUs are an integral part of that pool of talent. So then Ronald Butler, who's the president of Woodbridge, Virginia-based Networking and Engineering Technologies, Inc., says, what happens is we've got students who come out, they've got the textbook knowledge. They think that they understand what's going on. But then when you actually see a monitor and see all the countries that are hacking into a particular military base per hour, then you understand, wow, school kind of got me ready, but this workforce is going to teach me a lot more of what I need to prepare for. So again, what are these institutions for? Preparing you to go be exploited, to have your labor exploited, and to go possibly risk your life for the sake of this country to fight our enemies. So we got to really think about that. So the lack of focus from capitalist media on students protesting, obviously there's a connection to that. And the further focus on popular culture, for instance, on this Travis Scott issue, where again, I think it's all connected. So I don't think, I don't think it should not be talked about because it's a larger issue of capitalism as the enemy. But when you have students who are breathing mold, I'm going to keep saying that, and I feel passionate about that as a person who's allergic to mold. But other issues like workers everywhere are striking. This is not an issue to capitalist media because it's affecting the bottom lines. We can't encourage workers everywhere to strike. That's going to destroy the economy. So of course, CEOs, when the spike of COVID, when that news was initially happening, what was the response? Well, we don't care if people die. We just have to go out and make money. Like, we need money to be made. We need profit to be had. And so this is the same thing. And when somebody gets really sick from the living conditions, from the situation happening at Howard, if somebody dies due to mold inhalation, something happens, somebody gets physically injured, whatever, then obviously they have a response ready for that already. I mean, there are PR campaigns ready, just sitting and waiting in the wings for something to happen.
A lot of the news is the PR campaign.
Right. So they're going to have a response to that if their bottom line is affected like every single other multinational corporation, university, etc. But they don't feel that that's enough right now. It's like, okay, they're kind of a hindrance to what we want to do, but it's not, they're still here. They're still paying tuition. They're still here if they're not, And then, of course, there were the threats of expelling students for speaking out. And then I forget who it was, but they were like, no, students aren't going to be expelled. It's like, okay. So again, these issues are so interrelated because of the larger enemy of capitalism. And we have to look beyond a lot of this media and really seek these things out, because HBCUs are meeting with the military industrial complex, preparing to recruit students, just like ROTC, ROTC, we used to call it ROTC. Get the reference? I don't know. But just like ROTC used to go and pitch tables in front of high schools. And then you would be coming out and it'd be like, hey, So it's the same exact thing, except it's a larger organized structure that is fueling to organize, to recruit students. And so this is just, they're like, okay, how can we strengthen this to our advantage? And so, again, like the Bilderberg group, all of this stuff, like they meet every single year. They probably, I guess, met on Zoom or something during COVID. Or Davos, like all of these organizations, they meet and plan years ahead. Even though they meet annually, like they foresee what's happening. So guarantee these organizations are meeting. And it's no coincidence that Jeff Bezos was asked to sit on the board of the Pentagon. All of these things are connected. Yes, he refused, but make no mistake, he's still up in there connected. I mean, Amazon is hugely connected with police terrorism and surveillance of African people and oppressed people and marginalized people. So just because he's not sitting on the board of the Pentagon doesn't mean he's not acting as a capitalist appendage of the police state. So just as Howard is, just as other HBCUs are. And so just as Africans have been used to be on the front lines of representing a country that oppresses all colonized people, Howard and other HBCUs are being made to represent that same system. And so we see that falling apart. And it's such a great thing, again, to see that illusion. Yes, I mean, you and I already knew all of this, but people still believed in the power of HBCUs, especially like you see shows like Insecure, or, you know, like people are like, AKA, you know, it's just
going
like
back our day, a different world.
a different perfect example. So people wanted to go to HBCUs because of a different world. And so it's like, what do you call that? The propaganda. So it works in that same way, where it's just like, okay, we got to get these students to do that. But it's like Obama. It's like, just because you are African, just because you look African or whatever, does not mean you're a class interest or for African people, oppressed people anywhere, or the people's class. And my guess is that people are starting to see that with HBCUs, and that once again, that the whole representation thing and how it's seen under capitalist society is an illusion, that all this stuff, like if you dress in a certain way, it doesn't matter. You have no political power, no freedom in this country. You are seen as expendable. You are seen as an enemy of this country just by existing. And that, apparently that's what's happening with the students at Howard. It's like, okay. So it's like, I really do think capitalism is on its last leg, and capitalism is trying to scramble more and more, figuring out what to do, how to keep the illusion afloat. And they're running out of steam. And so you have on TV shows, they're talking about late stage capitalism now. I'm like, that's kind of weird. When I was in the hospital, I heard that. I was like, what? They're talking about late stage capitalism like that? That was just weird to me to hear that word come out of a TV show. And so we're seeing that, where people are trying to hold on to this illusion of HBCUs. I know there was a character in Insecure that was AKA or whatever, and people got mad. And then there's the Divine Nine, and where was it Kamala, like she's in all that stuff. And so people, I'm like, and then she is saying, don't come here, to folks who are fleeing countries due to US imperialism, by the way, but they can't come here because they're trying to find political asylum. And yet people are like, okay, I'm like, nah. So people are starting to see the veil drop and understand that, oh, it was a veil. Yeah. My eyes have been uncovered with the rag over my eyes or whatever. Oh, so yeah, I can't say I'm enjoying what I'm seeing, but they're definitely, I see a positive out of it, because I really do. When it was 1999, when the protests in Seattle happened, the WTO, I said, watch, people are going to start organizing. I said that. And as you know, Evan, like organizing and all this kind of stuff, you're not going to see the effects of it immediately. But I first took notice of it, that people really were, it's kind of another cycle. So people are like, oh, the 60s, romanticize the 60s and everything. But I saw another wave of it starting in 99. And, people want instantaneous action. I'm like, that, like, for any sort of liberation movements that's going to happen, it's not going to be instant, because the system of capitalism has been organizing for much longer. So obviously they're prepared. They're going to have tanks. They're going to have all this stuff. But people are going to keep organizing. And we're seeing this more and more. So people are like, wow, people are starting. I'm like, no, people been doing it. It's just not shown. The revolution will not be televised, right? So, but I saw that at 99, and I want to say, and then I'm going to shut up, with I remember when the news first was going on, like months ago, talking about the elections in Nicaragua. And I was like, oh boy, okay, just like the elections in Peru, all of this stuff, I was like, oh, imperialism is gonna start something. So of course, that's what's happening now in Nicaragua. But I keep saying this, I really owe so much to the Sandinistas for fueling that. And it was very indirect, because obviously being 10 years old, I didn't know Sandinistas, but learning about it. But the Sandinistas were that fuel that lit the fire of anti-capitalism in me. I'm 10 years old and watching, because my mother had TV on like from sun up to sundown, but she had the Iran-Contra hearings on. And so I knew, I was looking, I was like, something is seriously wrong with this picture. And, of course, learning more about it and, being 14 years old, beginning to study anarchist theory, Sopran, just all of this stuff. And the Italian anarchy, all this stuff, and then moving to Marx, and then moving, but it was that moment at 10 years old, I knew there was a problem with the system. I don't know how I figured it out, but I was like, there's a problem with the system. So I just wanted to just add a little note. I really owe so much to my political development to the Sandinistas. And yeah, again, it was indirect, but it was because this system worked so hard to fight against the Sandinistas. And the Sandinistas, 2007, became a government again. And people were like, oh, all the provisions we didn't have, we had now. And things are free. How about that? And so, of course, imperialism is working to fight that all over again. And we have this elections process, and it's like, So I just, as that's going on right now, I just really wanted to say that. And so I think that with everything going on at Howard, with all of the protests globally going on, with Africa on fire, with like the world, the revolutions are happening consistently. And people romanticize what revolutions are and what they would look like or whatever. They happen every single day. When it comes to revolution and thinking about it, we have to get out of a bubble. It is not, revolutions are not spontaneous. Revolutions are not reactionary. Revolutions are very organized. And if we look at the movements in the global South, like South and Central America, the Americas outside of the snakes, if we look at any movement in Vietnam, if we look at any movements that happen around the world, the Chavistas, if we look at anything, we understand that revolution is not spontaneous. If we look at the Cubano revolution, we understand that revolution is not spontaneous. So this romanticization of it, I mean, for the Sandinistas to hold a government for this long is because of the work that was done, that the people supported. So obviously it's not spontaneous, because if it was, then the imperialist governments around the world wouldn't work hard to get rid of it, because it's like, oh, well, whatever, that's going to pass. But they understand how organized the people are and how powerful revolutionary movements by the people and for the people are. So again, I'm so grateful for the indirect influence that the Sandinistas had on me in my political development, even at 10 years old, to know that the Iran-Contra hearings is something wrong with this country, and that I knew I didn't like Ronald Reagan, and that Ollie North was lying. I was 10 years old. How did I know that? And my guess is that the ancestors were like, yo, like, I don't know. But just, I knew it. And then like a few years passed, and I was like, there's a problem. And then I started listening to punk rock. And then like punk rock helped shape that even more. And so I'm also I know people are like, oh, you're African and punk rock. People used to make fun. I don't care what anybody says. And I want to say this too. And I am going to shut up. But having, been in punk bands, having been in plenty of brutal pits, I've been in so many, like, what's going on with that Travis Scott is not a mosh pit? I don't care what anybody says. I've been in some pits. And let me tell you, there's actually a code of ethics. If somebody falls, you pick them back up. If somebody's getting groped, that person gets out. Yeah, there's some pits where people act up or whatever, but usually majority of pits, the ones I've been into, and again, I've been in some rough pits, and if somebody hits, I'm gonna hit back. That's just me. Somebody grabs me on the street, I hit them. That's, you know. But as a disabled person, I have to navigate the world differently in terms of defense. I am aware of that. But just, you know, being someone at the time when I was regularly going to pits and metal shows, and yeah, I'm still a punk kid. I'm 45 now. Thankful to the universe for that, for being here. But yeah, I'm still a punk kid. I don't care what anybody says, but just knowing that energy, like, yes, you let off steam at the punk shows. Yes, you do. And I look at organizing against this system with that same energy. And so if you have somebody that's giving off that low vibrational energy, that energy that's honoring capitalism, which is very low vibrational and narcissistic energy, you push that away. You look, that's the pit. This life is the pit. And you got to push that aside. And what's going to happen when the masses are organized? Somebody falls and you pick them back up. I'm telling you, all of this is connected. So all that stuff you see with that trap, people calling it a mosh pit. I'm like, what kind of mosh pit is that? I've been in probably like hundreds of mosh pits in my life as a punk kid. And that is not a mosh pit. That's people just throwing their weight around and whatever. And it's like every man for himself or whatever. And it's like, that's not a mosh pit. Mosh pit is a collective. And so if we look at anybody calling themselves a revolutionary as an individual, pay them no mind. Revolution is collective, just like a mosh pit is collective. Just look at that. My advice is to go look at YouTube or whatever and watch old school mosh pits. And I know if you've never been in a pit, you're gonna be like, how can she say that? Oh, it's like, I'm serious. I've been in hundreds of mosh pits. It may look brutal, and sometimes it is, but so is fighting against the system, because the system is brutal, and you want to fight the system with all your might, and whatever capacity you have to do that. But I really am, yes, comparing this work to being in a mosh pit. And I've been through it hundreds of times, and I've been organizing in the A-APRP almost 9 years. This is rough. Like, sometimes you lose people in your life. We're like, what is that or whatever. People do not understand you. People want to defend capitalism, even if they can't define it. They're like, oh, socialism, whatever. They can't define it. And so that's what happens. People think mosh pits are bad or whatever, and they can't define it if they've never been in it and they're not organizing, but they think it's bad. So really just think about that and watch some pits, some old school pits, not these new pits that like Travis Scott, that's not a mosh pit. That's like low vibration, but watch some old school hardcore punk and metal pits. And I'm telling you, people are working together. Yes, there's a couple of those people that are acting up, but overall, I'm telling you, I really look at that in the same way, and getting this energy out in constructive ways, and organizing is a way to do that. Because what happens when people are individuals? Well, everything sucks and people just complain about it. When you're working with other people together and fighting this brutal system in a way just as hard, again, whatever your capacity is, I'm telling you, mosh pits organizing for liberation. I don't see them as any different. That's just me. But again, I'm a punk kid. So yeah, I'm like a punk and metal kid. So that is what I see. And yes, I love Michael Jackson, whatever, but I'm a punk kid through and through. It is because of punk that helped with the development politically that I have now. And I owe so much to that, just like I owe so much to the Sandinistas. And just like to this day, I owe so much to Nkrumah and Ture and so many people, Amy, Jacques, Garvey, so many people. I know I've said so much. So I'm gonna go, okay, Evan.
Yeah, one thing I was noticing about I've had like stuff about the Travis Scott stuff in the background at home, and I know it's like there's some people I just like all of a sudden I hear like, oh, there's something satanic. I'm like satanic, and then I was like looking at some of like the imagery. It was like, oh, okay, and I think like this is yeah, and this is like obviously nothing new. This whole say I don't know if you remember in the things like the 80s, like they had like the Satanic Panic, and it was like lots of music. It was like saying all this, and I think, and obviously like I haven't like studied too much, so you always feel free to correct or anything. But I think one thing is that you talk about this sort of like sacrifice, and like there's sort of like this idea of like the idea of Satan, and so um like this idea of like you're talking about the United States, that this idea of like almost it's like you're talking about like revolution, like this it's hard, like it's like it takes a lot of building and so forth, and like even if you hear like especially if you hear like for the Palestinians who like they're fighting for liberation, they talk about we talk about the martyrs and so forth, but again that's like a different sort of like sacrifice than say a sort of sacrifice for like a music event, or a sacrifice for like on a sporting event. That is it, and if you know there have been like crushes, they've been like crushes and so forth, like they talk about here. But I think about it was like a few decades ago. There was one at Who at a concert for the Who, and if you're familiar with sports, there's been about the Hillsborough disaster and all things. And I think, and this is all the idea of, and one thing in common is that like you also like this is the idea of we want of like this need to have something to like satisfy like the urge of like I want to see this something so great, and then in the lens of it, this is like some some like the person's like organizing like the events and so forth. They're like not sure what they're doing, or they do something else, and all of a sudden you get this rush, and then as for results of like crowd panic, like because people are so like visually they get so excited, like we want to see, and then if something doesn't match up, then we're like, oh, I want to do this, or like and it is sort of like counterbalance between like the collective will of this group and individual need to see these people. And I think in the case of like we talked about like, some imagery Travis got, that a lot of this is a bit of this. It's almost like trying to play off of it in ways of so like it's like, hey, like these people want to see me, and I enjoy like getting this. I don't know if it's like a rush from it, and so they just sort of play off the symbolism. And even if there's like no, like even if you don't think there's like this whole like like the whole QAnon. I think the whole QAnon stuff is sort of like you're talking about the satanic, like like some of these like conspiracy theories that you might hear news or regular media, so forth, that some of the like a lot of it is like it takes like some hints of what's actually happening among ruling class circles and sort of twists it in a way to make sure that you don't see the actual ruminations and like the actual horrible stuff that's going on. And I think I guess we talked about before this sort of like narcissism that one way to sort of like if you think that like I guess like some people they see like the what was it, Christianity, especially in the United States, and or like whatever hegemonic religion, they see that as like controlling them, and so they think, oh, I need to find something that sort of like rebels against it and sort of embraces my sort of like individual need, and so they bring out it may not be as like overtly like dealing with like any sort of like Crowley type stuff or whatever, or like oh, there's like a whole lot of stuff with Crowley but that's another story. But or like it was like the forget what was it the Hieronymus Bosch painting? Yeah, like to sort of like play off the like imagery of it. I think like even if you don't think that this like sort of mystical force or anything like that, that there is a sort of like that like as we know about like if we talk about the history of fascism, the idea like the sort of like the focus on the symbol or the aesthetic as like the thing in itself that's sort of beyond the material basis. And I think obviously not saying these factors or anything, but again, this like what like any going back to the relation between that and like the force of the military or like uplift, that there's always want to look at all these symbols and we want to keep on calling to it. And so even if it's a thing, like we talk about like rushing the stage and or like rushing in, and so like the drive that individual need that is produced by the superstructure of capitalism, and you have that sort of building up there, and yeah, and I think like you have some people like sort of like trying to play off of it, and more play off of it, then more people will take it in, and again.
Yeah, to your point, organization, I think that is a key factor in the basis for anything. So with the Who concert, it wasn't organized. So people were told, okay, it's going to start at this time. So people showed up and like, okay, what's going on? So the Who were having a sound check, but people thought it was the show because it wasn't organized. And so that's where that happened. And I think that this system of capitalism drives disorganization to hype up a lot of this damage that occurs. So whether it's militarily, whether it's economically, it drives individualism so much that the people will not organize together to produce a society, whether it's small for now, but growing out to be something larger where people's needs are met. So of course, they had to stop the Panthers. They had to stop the Sandinistas. They had to stop anything. They're trying to stop the Zapatistas. So it's just anything that is fueling organization amongst the people to have people's needs met, it's like, must be stopped. And so I think with the way the concerts are, again, I think there's a lot of analogies to be met here. And so getting back to Howard, again, the students are organizing and they must be stopped. So we have to have a strategy, some sort of response that veils what's actually going on until something's really going to affect our bottom line. Workers are walking out, going to blame it on the students because of what they're doing, even though they're protesting their material conditions. And then you hype up these celebrities to support Howard. And so again, it's the focus on celebrity culture as opposed to the conditions the students are living in. And then again, get to Travis Scott. So focus on celebrity culture as opposed to the system, which protects that behavior and protects the joy that people get out of seeing people injured or worse. So it all falls under the same system. And people are like, I'm not going to take it anymore. And so even if the whole, you talk about the sort of instantaneous culture and we want this or that, but that's what Travis Scott encourages. So there was one, he did a stage dive. I'm just like, okay. So I guarantee you, most people go to his concerts. People like the aesthetics of punk and metal, but they don't understand the nuances. So they may have seen, one of their favorite artists stage dive. But then what happens? Somebody grabs his shoe and he's just like, go beat him up. And he's chanting, like he's causing people to chant this energy to go attack this person who took his shoe. So he can stop a show because somebody grabbed the shoe, but he can't stop a show when people are literally getting trampled. So to me, it's the same thing as the capitalist system. People are literally starving. They have to choose between rent and they have to choose between food. That doesn't matter to the capitalist system. It's like when I had to do that whole, like the Obamacare, I literally was like, yeah, I got to pay my rent. And the lady on the phone with me is, I don't care as long as you pay it. I don't care what you're dealing with, as long as you pay it. So that's the capitalist system. It doesn't matter as long as you get up, set your alarm to go to your job. It doesn't matter if your labor is being exploited. It doesn't matter if you're not being paid a living wage. It doesn't matter if you just broke your wrist. It's like, get back there, get back in line, get back in line. It doesn't matter. So people are waking up to what's actually happening across the country. And I'm going to say across the globe. It may be various situations, but people are like, no, like, you're not going to come in and try to steal our elections. Y'all focus on that here with Trump or whatever. But that is literally what the US is doing, either stealing or attempting to steal the elections of other countries. And so people are like, you're not doing that. And so what's happening in Guinea? Same thing. It was just like, okay, so we have someone who was a puppet and then they're going to have another puppet, but people are like, you know? And so I think people are starting to figure out that there are more options. And people are like, we do not want puppet governments. We do not want you telling us how we should live. We do not want you telling us what democracy is when you don't even have it in your own country. So there's so much of that happening right now. And the veil is being lifted off of these identity politics of HBCUs, and it makes me very, very happy. The veil is being lifted off of capitalism itself, where people somehow think it's beneficial or could be tweaked. People are starting to understand that, no, the system needs to be done away with. And I'm loving it. And, you know, again, it's not going to happen. The end of capitalism is not going to happen in our lifetime. And, you know, people want to see this instant thing. But if you've been doing this work as long as we have, you're seeing it. You have to be organized to see it. You have to be do something. Yeah. To really see that work, because as an individual looking on social media, you're not going to see it. I mean, come on. So, and people on social media tend to be reactionary. So yes, I'm going to paraphrase Onyesamu here, Comrade Onyesamu. But so recruitment is an okay tool to use when it comes to social media. Or social media is an okay tool to use in terms of recruiting people if you are already organizing, but it is not a good organizing tool because people tend to be very reactionary on social media. And so if you're not doing this organizing work, I don't know why you're not. You're sitting there listening to us. You're sitting there listening to Onyesamu, you're sitting there listening to Jamu, you're sitting there listening to all of our comrades. You are listening to podcasts and webinars from Black Agenda Report. You're sitting there listening to Black Power Media, and you're not organizing yet. We're all sitting here telling you to organize. So what are you waiting for? You know there's a problem, but what are you doing?
Exactly. So, you don't have to, and again, like, you don't have, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to like have, like, just because we talk about organizing, it doesn't mean like you're automatically going to become the Communist Party of China. Like, they have like 900 million members or something. Like it's not going to happen like that. Like, but again, like if you like I was just talking to one right now that a few people in our apartment building, we're starting to start something up and organize. And this guy say we'll talk about the problems and go from there. And I'm not expecting it to become like I don't know, I expect to become a cooperation Jackson like right away, anything like that. But again, if you just like start with the neighbors, they start with people you know out the street, like considering like issue of homelessness, like you know if you have relations with people either you know or like you pass by and you have start a conversation, maybe you do that, or if you know someone that's domestic workers or stuff like that. Like I think of like where you're located and or if you're in school still. Like you don't have to be adult to organize. You could be a child, like a kid, a child. And if you know, say it's your school, you could do organizing. And of course, and on the other hand, if you're an elder and you know about it, like you haven't thought about it before, I think like they don't, especially COVID, like they're not caring about the elderly, especially if you're of the colonized people. They're not caring about you. So yeah, they organize, make sure that you get your stuff safe, and yeah. And if you know other organizations are doing some work, you talk with them, and that's how this stuff builds.
I tell you this, Hbcus, who is the for-profit organization that deals with the housing for Howard, they certainly, they're organized to get that money, but they don't care that, there's mice. They don't care that there's mold. They don't care that there's asbestos. I mean, breathing in asbestos? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And this is the conditions that people are living under. So organize. That is the key. That is the key to all of this. And I really, as I said, I think that students are going to understand that. I mean, they're getting a taste of it now. I'm sure that there are students who never organized a day in their life and they're like, oh, okay. But that fire, because of this situation, was lit under them, and it's going to fuel them to join other organizations. That's my guess. Maybe not everyone, but hopefully everyone. But I think, sometimes it does take a situation where you are personally affected to say, oh, I see the larger problems. And I don't think, ideally everyone would understand there's a larger problem, but that's not the reality. People need to be moved by something personally in order to understand there's a larger problem. So I can't lament about that. For some reason, 10 years old, understood there was a larger problem watching around country, but I don't think that's everyone. And I don't think that's a bad thing. So I just hope, and I'm going to keep saying this, that students at Howard and other HBCUs understand the capitalist connection. Obviously, some of them have grants, but a lot of these private universities understand that it's not about supporting African people. It's not about supporting you to be a better individual. It's to prep you to be a cog in the wheel of the system. I mean, look at how at HBCUs, they force people to cut their locks because it's not sufficient for the workforce. So you're not like cultural styles, whatever that it's. So how is that any different than you being in the US military and being like, you can't wear locks? I know they're changing that because of protests, but how is that any different? It's telling you have to be in the system and assimilate in some way. Like this aspect of culture, it may be the neatest set of locks ever, but they make people cut their locks. You can have interlocks, all of this stuff in braid, all twisted up. Doesn't matter. It's like, that's not suitable for the workplace. So they're not, the goal of HBCUs is not to celebrate your culture. Again, it is to prepare you for being a cog in that wheel. And the fact that HBCUs were started by a Quaker, a European, that's the first. So everyone's like, HBCUs, that's for Black people. I'm like, it was started by a European Quaker. So that's just a whole, like, we can do a whole episode on that. But, the fact that, people honor it historically, if you were historically Black, I'm like, we got to look at the history of that. And just, again, if we look at the history of HBCUs, how they came to be, again, it was like coming up and being part of that society. And, it is very, very counter-revolutionary. So to think that HBCUs are in any way sufficient to deal with any issues that Africans face in this country, you must look at the history of HBCUs and the patterns of, again, training people to be cogs in this wheel of capitalism. So I think it's important to, again, understand these illusions under this system and why they encourage you to participate in that. So I would say, I'm like, don't go to college, like, whatever. I don't think that it's the most important thing for a person to do. I mean, I went to college, I graduated from college, but, but, and then you're in grad school. So I don't think that, again, I think there is something to that, but if you're not going to use it to fuel the revolution, then you got to think about what your purpose is for doing it. Is it to just, again, be a cog in the wheel of capitalism, or are you taking those tools to work for the liberation of the masses of people? So that's a question we all need to ask ourselves. And, when I was in college, I participated in walkouts and I did, and I was like, whatever. But again, like, I already identified as an anti-capitalist by that point when I was in college. So, my whole mind was thinking about all these other things in larger pictures. But I knew that I was just like, I'm not going to have a career to bang. I already, that's just where I was. But again, that is me. I'm talking about the collective structure of how colleges work and universities work. I'm a different person. I wasn't seeing college as a way for me to fuel my career. I was just like, I think it'd be all right, whatever, but it wasn't a way that how we're trained is to be like, well, this can help your career. And I think, what you're doing in grad school as well, like, it's helping you, you're doing all this stuff and you're also participating in an organized revolutionary process. So this is just a component of that, but it's not something that everyone is thinking about. And I really do think that this is going to fuel the fire for a lot of students. And it makes me so happy. Why did I sound like Oprah? Hold on. You get the revolution and you get the revolution and you get the revolution. Anyway, what are we doing? You got anything to add to this episode? Oh my goodness. You got any last words, Evan?
Just again, like, one thing I love is like they act local, think global. Like, you gotta understand that, like I was said earlier, that like the theory of practice is empty and practice of theory is blind. Like, you have to understand how they synthesize. Like again, like some of them might be organizing and then they do something reformist and then they realize, oh, this is not working. So, and like they read some of the elders, like one alumni of Kwame Ture, read like his work, or read some others who were doing that work, and say like understand like how like student movements, like there's always been with like student movements, there's always that like on one hand, like how like disruptive it is and how like it had that energy to like create change, but at the same time you also have to understand like because they're in for the most part in locations where it's like whether it is to sort of reinforce the capital system that sometimes if it's like disconnected from workers, whether it at the there or locally or it's like here in the United States, if it's not connected with the indigenous nations who that land is occupying, or they're not connected with revolutionary organizations who understand like what the great Jacques is. That again, if it's not reaching like as of workers and the lumpen and so forth that are dispossessed, then there's always like that risk of it like sort of like feeding itself back into the system. And yeah, and again, like think of like all the many revolutionaries who attend the university or might be PhD, might masters, so forth, and use that for the revolution, and just keep on organizing and do that self-criticism, positive criticism, and do all that demographic centrals and so forth, and you got do that thing.
Yay! And we have our fellow comrades in podcasting. So we have, I guess they're going to change the name pretty soon, but it is still currently Weekly Pan-African News, even though they are twice a month now. So they just had a recent episode, so it's not going to be next week, but so they do twice a month, weekly, as for now, Pan-African News. And then we have our Ancestors' Voices, which does come on every Sunday. And I think, are they on like 90th episode, something like that? I think they're approaching the 90s, if not there yet. That is amazing. Yeah, they've been doing it every single week. And they just did the series on Ajamu's book in terms of organizing against fascism, white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism.
I highly recommend like watching. If you got some people, maybe they have trouble with that issues with literacy, so to put that on and use that either as a supplement. Boom, there you go.
Yeah, it's a great program and a great series. And Revolutionary African Women, and we have Forward Ever podcast. So there are several, and of course, as mentioned, we have BAP. We have oh my goodness, there's so many. There's We Charge Colonialism. There's so many. That's Black Agenda Report, BAP, and we have the Black Power Media. And there's so many things that you could look at in terms of getting this information. But most importantly, organize. That's the most important thing you could do. You can sit and watch podcasts, but that will be a very passive thing to do. We must be active and organized if we're serious about fighting the system of oppression, because it affects us all. And I'm going to end and say, hopefully, the students at Howard, maybe there's one student at Howard that sees this. It's just like, yeah, I'm going to join the A-APRP. Who knows? But join an organization. If you don't see any organizations that are satisfactory to you, whatever that means, create your own. But the fact is, we all need to be organizing if we understand how serious this issue is. So organize, forward ever, backwards never.
Forward.